It almost feels like a radical thing these days, doesn't it? To just do something because you enjoy it.
Yeah, no likes attached, no profit motive.
Exactly. We've been looking at some really interesting stuff about this.
Yeah.
All this modern obsession with internet fame, financial gain. It really makes you stop and think. Have we maybe lost something? That pure, simple fun of doing things we actually love.
I think that's the core question, and that's what we want to dig into here. Why does chasing that online validation, those numbers, often end up, stealing the actual joy from our hobbies?
Right. And importantly, how do we maybe get that back? How do we find that genuine enjoyment again?
Precisely.
Okay, so let's start with that pull. The allure of external validation. Internet fame. It feels huge, like the new dream, especially for younger generations. What is it that makes it so magnetic?
Well, fundamentally, it taps into something very human, doesn't it? That need for recognition. We all want to be seen, appreciated.
Sure, that makes sense.
But the internet, especially these social platforms, they've sort of supercharged it, turned it into a constant feedback loop.
Like a game.
Exactly like a game. Those likes, the shares, the comments, they're instant, a little digital thumbs up.
That little dopamine hit everyone talks about.
Oh, it feels good. Or at least it feels like something important is happening. But it's often quite surface level.
And the material we looked at also brings up some maybe less comfortable drivers behind this. Things like pride, vanity, ego, even greed. How do those play into it?
That's where it gets deeper. If you look at pride, it's often seeking that external applause to kind of prop up the ego, right? And vanity loves that surface admiration. The online world is almost perfectly designed for that, with everyone showing their best moments, their highlight reel.
Yeah, the curated self.
Exactly. And then when those metrics, the likes, the follows, start to look like they could translate into actual money. Well, that's when greed can creep in.
And suddenly, the reason you started doing the thing in the first place gets foggy.
Completely clouded. Pride makes that follower count feel like it is your self-worth. Vanity whispers that if no one sees you doing it, it doesn't really count.
It's almost impossible to avoid on platforms like, Reddit, YouTube, TikTok. They seem built to encourage constant self-promotion. You feel like you have to broadcast everything.
That's a really critical point about how they're designed. The algorithms often reward consistency, high engagement.
So you have to keep feeding the beast.
You do, and that naturally pushes creators towards performing rather than just creating. Those metrics, the views, the subs, they get tangled up with who you feel you are.
Yeah.
There's that example in our sources, the young musician.
Oh, yeah, that was striking. Starts out just loving music, playing for themselves in their room. Pure joy.
Pure joy. But then they go online, maybe get a little traction.
And suddenly it's all about strategy.
Yeah.
Chasing trends, algorithms, sponsorships.
Views become the goal. And that initial spark, that love for just making music, it starts to fade. It gets lost in the noise and the numbers game.
The ego takes over, needing that constant validation fix from outside.
It really can. And the art itself, the music, whatever it is, it risks becoming just a product, a commodity.
And the creator becomes what, like an agent selling that commodity?
Pretty much. Often sacrificing that original passion along the way. It's a subtle shift, but a powerful one.
And alongside that, there's this relentless drive for more. More followers, more views, more revenue. The sources talk about this as a kind of digital greed.
Yeah, and this illusion that there's some finish line.
Right, like if I just hit this number, then I'll be satisfied. But it never really works like that, does it?
Rarely. It reminds me a lot of the Buddhist idea of tanha, that craving, that thirst for something external that you think will finally satisfy you, but it's ultimately unquenchable.
Because the platforms themselves are built on it.
Absolutely. They monetize attention, every click, every view, every second someone spends watching. That's valuable to them.
So there's inherent pressure built into the system to just keep going, keep producing, keep climbing.
Relentless pressure. And the actual doing of the thing, the feel of the guitar strings, the challenge of figuring out a game strategy, the quiet satisfaction of crafting a sentence.
It gets lost.
It gets pushed aside. The focus shifts entirely to the outcome, the win, the validation, the numbers.
Yeah, like the fun drains out of playing a game if all you obsess about is the final score. Or writing feels like a chore if you're only thinking about clicks.
Exactly.
So how do we fight back? How do we rediscover that spark? Just enjoying the process.
Well, the material we looked at points towards reclaiming intrinsic motivation. It's about consciously shifting our mindset.
How we think about work, how we think about play.
Right. Think about someone learning pottery for the first time. Remember that example?
Yeah, the novice potter.
They're completely absorbed, right? In the feel of the clay, the spinning wheel. The satisfaction is right there, in the moment.
Regardless of whether the pot turns out okay or if anyone ever sees it.
Exactly. That's pure intrinsic engagement, just for the sake of doing it.
It's such a contrast to that image of the vlogger agonizing over thumbnails and titles.
Totally. Where the joy of making seems completely overshadowed by the anxiety of performing and getting clicks.
So how do we cultivate more of that potter mindset?
A key idea is the beginner's mind. Approaching things with curiosity, openness, valuing the session itself, not just the end product or the applause.
Okay, that sounds good in theory, but practically.
Practically, it could mean setting real boundaries, like having designated offline time where you don't check metrics at all.
Turn off the notifications.
Definitely. Or deliberately choosing analog hobbies, things that resist easy quantification.
Like what? Bookbinding, you mentioned.
Yeah.
Sketching. Hiking.
Things like that. Activities that are inherently about the experience, not easily packaged for online consumption.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
The sources also brought in a really interesting angle, the 7 virtues, as potential antidotes to those deadly sins we talked about earlier. Pride, vanity.
Yeah, that was fascinating, taking these ancient concepts and seeing how they apply now in our digital lives.
How does that work? How can virtues help combat the chase for likes?
Well, if you think about it, cultivating these virtues can directly counter those ego-driven urges. Take humility. In this context, humility could mean sharing your work simply because you valued the process of making it, not because you're demanding fame or recognition.
Detaching the sharing from the need for applause.
Precisely. Or diligence, focusing on honing your craft, getting better for the sheer satisfaction of improvement, not just for external reward.
Right, the internal drive.
And there's temperance, basically, moderation, setting healthy limits on how much time and energy you pour into chasing engagement metrics.
Not letting it consume everything.
Exactly. And charity, actively supporting other creators, celebrating their successes without feeling envious or competitive.
Building community instead of just competing.
Yeah. Patience, too. Appreciating that growth, whether it's skill or audience, often happens slowly, organically, resisting that need for instant viral success.
Which the internet seems to promise, but rarely delivers sustainably.
Right. And finally, kindness. Both towards yourself, accepting that not everything you create will be perfect, and towards others, engaging genuinely rather than just performatively.
So cultivating these qualities helps shift the focus inward, away from the fleeting external stuff.
That seems to be the idea, moving away from those often hollow external rewards, the likes, the momentary fame, the potential profit, towards a deeper, more lasting sense of personal satisfaction and meaning found in the activity itself.
It's really about valuing the journey of creation, isn't it? Not just pinning all hopes on some perceived destination of making it.
I think that captures it perfectly, that pull towards internet fame and financial gain. It's strong, no doubt. But it's often tangled up with pride, vanity, ego, greed.
And those things actively distract us.
They pull us away from the simple, inherent delight that comes from just doing something because we love doing it, for the love of the process.
So the big takeaway seems to be about mindfulness, really. Being present in the activity, understanding our true internal motivations, and maybe consciously practicing some of these virtues.
Yeah, to rediscover the joy in the doing. It might even mean redefining what success looks like for ourselves, moving beyond those easy-to-count metrics.
Back towards genuine fulfillment.
Which brings us to a final thought, something for you listening to consider. How might your own experience change? How might your definition of success shift if you decided to focus purely on the enjoyment you get from an activity itself?
With no thought of external rewards.
Exactly. Maybe take a look at the things you do, your hobbies, your creative pursuits. Ask yourself honestly, what's the main driver? Is it that deep internal satisfaction? Or are you perhaps chasing something else entirely?